Hey everybody, this is Mary Grothe, and you're tuning in to my podcast, Destination Remarkable, the show where I chat about my journey through life from childhood to founding 3 companies to my venture launching 2 books with Forbes. Every week, I'll dive in and unveil the highs, the lows, and even the nitty-gritty details of my journey. It's raw, it's real. Let's get started. Hey, Destination Remarkable, I'm Mary Grothe. Pleasure to meet you if this is the first time that you're tuning in. For all of our longtime listeners that were engaging with me on other platforms and our other podcast, Revenue Radio, welcome to Destination Remarkable. I'll begin by giving you a brief background on who I am for those of you that are new, and then I'm going to catch up all of our listeners who have been following along over the last couple of years. I'm going to tell you what has transpired over the last few months since we've been on break. A little bit about me. I'm from Northwest Indiana. I grew up in the performing arts. You could look at my childhood in 2 ways. From one side, it was actually pretty cool. I grew up in the performing arts as a triple threat, acting, singing, dancing. My dad was an opera singer and he was also an actor and was in a lot of movies. We lived right outside of Chicago, so he got to film a ton. And my mom was a classical pianist and a choral director. So the 2 of them started a small business when I was 3 years old, and I was the first one enrolled in dance and very quickly embraced the performing arts. And I found myself on stage later that year in my first production with the Community Theater Guild and Cat in the Hot Tin Roof. And that was just the start. From there, I got to perform for years. I was even singing opera with my dad. I was 9 or 10 years old, I think, and I was at the mayor's inaugural ball, or I don't know what it was, but I had the time of my life being raised that way. That's the cool part of the story. The sad part of the story and the challenging part of the story is that my mom is an alcoholic and my dad was an abuser. So the dark side of this was my upbringing was very difficult and challenging and hard. And if any of you have been raised by an alcoholic parent, you know how difficult it is to live day by day because the rules always change. And what I mean by that is how the rules were set on one day, you'd get in trouble for one thing and praised for another. But then the next day, those 2 things could literally be reversed. The thing you did right yesterday is now something wrong, and the thing you did wrong yesterday is now okay. And as a child growing up in that atmosphere, it was very confusing. I just never knew the rules of the game and how to win. With that, I dealt with a significant amount of abuse. It was mental, it was emotional, sometimes physical, and it just was very difficult for me to navigate. But I was a child, I didn't know anything else. So I developed some really strong survivorship skills. And I also learned how to read the room. So my EQ skills grew as a young child because I was able to understand what was happening around me, look at all the variables, and then make a decision on how I was to be on any given day so that I could get the best outcome possible, preferably not getting yelled at or screamed at or in trouble or sent to my room or being made to feel like I was never good enough and a pile of crap. So on that cool upbringing in one respect, difficult in the other. And then the biggest pivotal point in my childhood was when I was 14 years old and my parents had been struggling financially significantly. And we didn't know as a family. Like, I think we knew a little bit. We had some warning signs, but as a 14-year-old, like, how much do you really know? So finally, after a couple of years of struggling financially, my parents had taken money from the community. They had changed the performing arts school from for-profit to nonprofit, ran fundraising campaigns, but then they were pocketing the money from that and not paying back the companies that were doing the fundraiser. Here's an example, like you sell cookie dough, so you take money from people, but they weren't paying the cookie dough company. They were just taking the money coming in and trying to cover bills. And so anyway, they ended up being thousands and thousands, I don't know the number, but thousands and thousands of dollars in debt. Also during that time, I believe that they took a second mortgage out on our house. So we were overextended there. So the bank took our house and had an auction in our backyard. So here I am, 14 years old, everything I've ever known. I've got a red and white tent in my backyard and an auctioneer auctioning off all of our items. And we had this 2-day period where we were auctioning off, losing our belongings, and then packing up what we had left and driving across the country and moving to Boulder, Colorado. It was such a crazy time for me, and realizing that my life as I knew it was going to forever change. And when we moved out to Colorado, at that point, I was 14, my brother was 15, and my parents took minimum wage jobs. And they said, we can't afford to live where you have to file bankruptcy. We have minimum wage jobs. Like, you all need to work. You and your brother need to work. And so we both got jobs at the local grocery store in Boulder, and we both worked our way through high school. So there's so much to this story, so many twists and turns that you'll hear embedded throughout these podcast episodes. I'll tell you more about, but also I'm going to tell you about this journey I'm on right now, because Forbes, like the Forbes, has agreed, we're in agreement to have me write a book about this story and publish it under that Forbes brand. And I'm super excited about that journey that I'm on. So you'll hear more about this, but I'll fast forward a little bit. So high school had some ups and downs. 18 years old, I have this vision of being a professional dancer. I had a scholarship to CU Boulder to major in dance. And I ended up having a car accident, and it was debilitating. It was 2 months before I graduated high school, or maybe a month before I graduated high school, and I was not even able to walk. So my future of being a professional dancer, so yet again, the rug was just ripped out from underneath me. And I entered into a very, very, very dark 4-year period of my life. It's surprising that I didn't end up dead or in jail. Yeah, it was bad. You'll read more about it in the book. For the first time ever, I'm opening up and telling people about that 4-year period, which was a very scary time in my life. But I was able to secure a position at 22 years old with a payroll company, a Fortune 1000 payroll and HR company, who changed my life. And I had never worked in a professional corporate environment. And so I take this role, and I'm working for the number one sales team in the company, in the country. And I had a team of 8 that I supported and a sales manager. And I was a district sales assistant. So I did all the administrative work. And through that period, I was able to learn sales, mid-market sales, software sales, service sales, inside and out. Also took some Dale Carnegie courses. And then they allowed me a seat on the mid-market team after 2 years against their better judgment. But my manager believed in me. And I became the number one rep in 30 days. And all of a sudden, my life, again, just changed. I went from making $29,000 a year to over $200,000 a year. As the number one rep, I not only made a ton of money, but I also was able to start experiencing life in a completely different way. And I started living life like the lifestyles of the rich and famous, at least it felt like. And I got to the point where I owned 2 houses, 2 cars, was traveling for these long weekends all the time. And I would always be out at the bar buying rounds for all my friends, because I was only 24 and none of my other friends were really doing much with their lives. So they were not able to afford things. So I was really just buying friends at that point and blowing my money, partying super hard, and ended up trying to heal from my past wounds through performance, and was trying to mask and cover up that hardship that still hadn't healed in me with all of a sudden now I think I'm worth something because I'm a top rep and I make a lot of money. And I was on this path just doing everything the world told me to do. Excuse me. After 5 years, I left. And I took a VP of sales and marketing position with one of my clients, and they were a startup. So I dropped my earnings down to $3,000 a month from the lifestyle that I had, but I had a decent amount in savings, and I took an equity position. So I was young and I didn't really understand equity, but I was told, hey, this is a lot more money. Okay, I never saw a penny from that. But within 7 months, I was able to help quadruple the size of that company from $125,000 in annual revenue to $480,000. And it was in that 7-month period, I fell in love with go-to-market strategy and business strategy and scaling companies. So as a young 27, 28-year-old at the time, I knew that I had a talent in this and I wanted to do this for a living. So I started my first company at 28 years old called Butterfly Creative. And for 3 years, I helped over 30 startups and entrepreneurs, very early stage, build their business plans, their go-to-market strategies, go-to-market and launch. I also, during that time, grew my passion for youth entrepreneurship, and I started a program called $1 Million Butterflies, as well as Teen Biz Network. And I started working in schools and conducting workshops. We also ended up with a TV show on Fox Saturday mornings on local Denver KDVR, as well as had a radio show which was crazy that I got to do all of this. It was super fun. Unfortunately, it wasn't generating a lot of revenue. I ran myself into the ground, accumulated some debt during that time. I also hit rock bottom. And as a CEO, a young CEO of a new company who still didn't have myself right, I was making a lot of money and successful to everyone around me. That's what they thought, but I was so broken on the inside. So during that 3-year period, I became intoxicated one evening and I drove my car into my neighbor's front porch. It's great. I entered into a sober period for the first time since I was 21 years old, and had the opportunity to reflect on my brokenness and was able to identify that there were gaping holes inside of me that could only be filled by one thing. And that's when I came to Christ. And I started to explore Christianity and my relationship with the Lord, and it changed my life. So during this 3-year period, I hit my rock bottom. I found Jesus, then very quickly met my now husband, and things just completely started to change. And I fell in love with the most incredible man I have ever met. We got married. And the day I came back from my honeymoon, I decided that I was done with entrepreneurship for right now. I had started back at the payroll company, gave it 3 more years, recouped my earnings, paid off my debt, got a little bit more corporate experience. And my husband and I welcomed a child into the world in 2016. My son is incredible. And then when he was about 1.5 years, I said, hey, I want to start a company again. And my husband just looked at me and said, do it. Okay. I was the breadwinner for the company or for the household. And it was scary to leave with those golden handcuffs, a career I was very good at. I just had no passion for selling payroll anymore. And so I started House of Revenue 4.5 years ago under a different name. It's called Sales BQ. And I started the company with a vision of helping small business owners build their sales teams, their sales departments. And so that's what I set out to do as a fractional VP of sales. We did that for 18 months. I grew a small team. We did $500,000 in our first year. And in the middle of our second year, we finally had an 18-month feedback loop from our clients. And we were able to see, it was so obvious. The companies, our clients who had a great brand and good marketing engine, they outperformed our other clients. And we knew if we wanted to be brilliant in the work that we did or do remarkable work, which is the tagline we adopted in 2019, more on that to come. But when we adopted that tagline, I just realized that we have to grow. And so we tripled in size and we brought on experts in branding, marketing, and revenue operations, became a HubSpot partner. And 2019, we did 1.5 million in revenue. In 2020, we launched what we do now and we rebranded as House of Revenue. We go on contract for companies typically in that 1 to 10 million range. And we go on as a fractional CRO with a growth team. And we are able to rebrand them or do the brand refresh. We build out their entire go-to-market strategy, and we help them build their inbound marketing engine, build out their sales team, their customer success team. And that revenue engine starts from that first awareness point and of branding all the way through marketing, sales, and CS. So this is what we do now. In 2020, we scaled 9 companies, 9 out of 9. It was a tough year with COVID. More on that story too later to come. Trying to give you all a high-level overview here. I feel like I've lived 5 lifetimes, but anywho. And then in 2021, we adopted a vision of a team member, which I was pushing down for a little bit. It's like, I don't want to scale. I don't want to grow. I love what we do, but I was feeling, this team member had a really great vision for our company, and he really well laid it out and said, here's how we can scale and double in size and eventually really, really grow that into that $10 million, $15 million. And I never really had it on my heart to be a big company or to scale. In fact, I never had a top line revenue goal for this company until that moment. And I finally just said, yes, what the heck? Let's give it a shot. Let's see if we can do it. Well, come to find out we did, and we more than doubled in size in a 9-month period. We adopted our own playbook, the same one we used for our clients, and we went from, in January of 2021, it was 11 or 12 employees at 190,000 in monthly revenue that month, and by September, we did well over 400,000. We had 28 team members at our peak. We launched a brand inside of our company. At that point, we experimented with doing marketing-only engagements, like a marketing agency. And that was an experiment that lasted about 3 months. It didn't have the same traction or results as our full fractional CRO work, so we closed that down. But we also experimented working with startups and pre-revenue companies, and that was a challenge. Too many variables outside of our control, and our success rate was was affected by that. And so at the end of a very exhausting 9 months, I actually had a mental breakdown. It was October of 2021. I've been very open about this. I describe all of these things on Revenue Radio. You can go back and listen to prior podcasts. But I had a really difficult time. And unfortunately, my husband and my son had to bear the weight of that breakdown. And it was at Disneyland and it was public and it was not good. But I realized, hey, yes, we scaled the company, but this company is now turned into something that I don't even recognize. And I was really struggling to identify my role and where to be a part of it. And during this time, I was so mentally unwell, I needed to put somebody in my seat. So we promoted a team member, absolutely one of the best revenue leaders I have ever worked with, and I love him to death. And we put him in my seat to lead client engagements, to lead the company, and really like be the face of this company internally and externally. And those two executives, they did a phenomenal job. And I'm so thankful for how they led. It allowed me to take a step back because I was unwell and I didn't know what was going on in my life. And I noticed that with me being unwell, I was negatively impacting the people around me very unintentionally. My heart is for the Lord. I am a woman of faith and I lead with love and optimism and mercy and grace and kindness. But when I'm unwell, like I can't give what I don't have. So I didn't communicate well. I wasn't a good friend during that time. I could have been so much better for our two key executives, but I was in such a world of hurt. And I'm able to see that now that I'm way on the other side of it. So fast forward, I knew my seat at House of Revenue was changing. And so I just started looking around for other opportunities. I started investing and going on and scaling other projects. And it became very muddy during that time of my role, who I was for. And it caused a lot of confusion inside of our company. And it was hard. And finally, in March of 22, I started to feel so disconnected from who we were. And I was putting pressure on my two executives and creating some friction. And it just wasn't good. We had two different visions for the company. I wanted to scale it back. I wanted to take us back to 2020. They wanted to continue on this trajectory forward with everything that they had built and continue to scale it. And I thought, you know what? I relinquished control. I gave this company to them over the last 6 months. Maybe I should just sell it. And I can sell it and then they can be the key executives. They'll bring in a new owner. I can go start something that looks a little bit more similar to what I had in 2020, keep it small. And so that's actually the path I went down. And in that moment, it was really coming from this place of not being well, of I was scared. In my life, I've had moments where that fight or flight has kicked in and I have tried to just cut and run, flip the light switch. How do I get out of here? And I've said, hey, if I didn't own this company, I would have quit by now. And so it really started to resurface those childhood feelings. I didn't feel like I was good enough. I didn't feel like I belonged. And I certainly didn't feel like I was of value to anyone. Therefore, I wanted to sell the company. But God had different plans. We had a great buyer and at asking price, had a great buyer. And, unfortunately, the company was just different in the first half of 2022. So the offer and the valuation of the company was based on our consistent growth and performance from 2017 through end of 2021. And when we went to market in March, I think is when we listed, we didn't even have Q1 complete with financials and a projection moving forward. So we marketed the business based on 2021. And then once this buyer spent a couple of months in due diligence and digging, he revised his offer based on really who the company was in 2021. And it was an offer I wasn't willing to accept, but we had an amazing backup buyer. And I love these two. I felt so aligned with them as a husband-wife team. And I just felt so aligned. And we shared in values. And I really thought that they were tremendous. But God's plans will always, always trump anything that I could ever create or try to put in motion. And during that time when we were talking about an offer and trying to go through logistics and how it would be structured and what we would be doing, there was a little bit of an emphasis on this top line revenue goal in order to get 50% of the payout over 10 years. And I never really put that much emphasis on our top line revenue here. And I've always felt like you need to do right by your team first and do right by your clients first. The revenue will come. But if you're making decisions based on hitting a top line revenue number, like that's a scary position to be in when you're in a very high touch professional services company like ours. Like we only sell people. sounds weird. Bear with me. We don't have a product. We sell the talents and the brains of these unbelievably brilliant revenue leaders that we have working here. It's so hard to find brilliant revenue leaders, which is why we have such a great place in the market. People want to have more revenue. So it's a need. And anyway, there's great space for us. So on that note, I became really timid and concerned. But also during that time, I was struggling with my two executives, created so much friction. And at the end of the day, they just felt like, hey, we're taking this company in a different direction than what you want. And they both resigned. And it was unexpected. However, in hindsight, if I wasn't in such a world of hurt and distraction in my own poor state of mental health, I probably would have seen it and been more in tune. But I think that they were both very brave in making that decision and just stepping away from it. So on May 31st of this year, the company fell back in my hands, a company that I hadn't really been a part of for 6 months or so, even longer. And I had an opportunity to make a decision. And I felt the Lord just speaking to me that when we rebuilt this company in 2020 after COVID hit and we rebranded as House of Revenue and we had this unbelievable success rate in 2020 and the work that we did was just pure magic. With that, I could just feel the Lord telling me that he was going to restore that and we were going to go back to that and I needed to trust him and that he wasn't done with me yet. And that this business wasn't given to me to be sold. This business was given to me as an investment, as a way to steward his goodness and love and grace and the brilliant work that my team do. That we have an opportunity to do business differently than how you see it in the market. With that, I also during this time was able to secure an agreement with Forbes. And I get to publish not one, but 2 books with Forbes. I get to tell my personal story. And then the second book is going to be all about this revenue scaling playbook or something like that. Don't hold me to it. We haven't mapped out a book plan for the second book. We're just working on the first one now. But I've also contracted with a personal branding agency with a significant international presence because my book is going to have international distribution. If you know anything about me, I'm a domestic girl. I don't travel internationally. I like staying in my comfort zone, but I really feel like the Lord's telling me to get out of that comfort zone because I've surrendered to him. I'm fully committed to sharing the gospel and spreading his goodness to the ends of the earth through the marketplace. I'm in a unique position as a woman of faith, in a position as a CEO, as an entrepreneur with a decent sized platform. But my plan is to say, hey, look, let me model it for you. You can be a wife, mom, CEO and be a business leader and have credibility and influence, but also be a really wonderful person and do right by people and show up with grace, mercy, and kindness and love, even with us as humans, where we want to be triggered and react negatively and hurt people and whatever. I'm going to model this. It's going to be hard, but I'm going to model this and I'm going to prove to everybody that you can be an amazing CEO. Now, granted, I am a broken sinner. Okay. I'm a human. I make mistakes, but it is my commitment to own them and to speak about them, what led to it, how I overcame it. And I'm here to be an inspiration to you. I want you to commit your life to better doing. And anyway, that's just a description of our journey together. More on all of this to come, but I'm in such an incredible spot right now. And I'm so pleased to be sitting with you. And stay tuned because you're going to get another weekly episode coming up. Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you're interested in connecting with me, you can find me, Mary Grothe, spelled Grothe, on LinkedIn, Twitter, TikTok, or Instagram.